What's up, guys? Welcome to Jew Whiskey. I'm Jeff. This is a channel where I offer my thoughts and opinions on a specific whiskey, and if you stick around to the end, I'll be giving it a score as well. If that sounds interesting, hit subscribe down below, and with that out of the way, let's jump into our review. Today we're looking at the Ledaig 18. Stick around. Alright, so I've been on a spate of re-reviews recently, and this is one that I've been meaning to get around to for a while. This is one that I have reviewed before, but it was way back in the early days of the channel. Yeah, I mean, look at that young pup. Or actually, come to think of it, that was a different Ledaig 18 in that review, because that was the old one that came in those fancy wooden boxes. That was batch 3. I think they did 1, 2, and 3, and then they stopped doing batches, and then they just kind of standardized the release. So it kind of is a re-review, but it also kind of isn't. Either way, this version of the Ledaig 18 has made it on the channel before, maybe not in terms of a review, but it's definitely made like a few lists and stuff. You know, I've done like top 18-year-olds before, so it's not really a mystery as to whether or not I am going to like this one. Of course I am, but you should stick around to the end anyway, because I'm going to score it, and it's the polite thing to do. Also, the score that I give this one will likely be different. In the early days of the channel, I was enthusiastic. I scored this one a 93. I can't remember the last time I scored anything a 93. Also, I have brought my scoring system down, so there's that. Anyway, not a lot of information out there about this one. Of course, it's 18 years old, it's peated, it's finished in sherry cask. That's about all we know. But it's from Ledaig. Ledaig is such a good brand. It's such a consistent brand. Just being from this brand is enough to tickle my fancy, and that gets me excited. I'm always excited to have my fancy tickled. No. In terms of reception, this one has been very well received in whiskey circles. A lot of people really love this one. Personally, I don't know anyone that dislikes this whiskey. Of course you might. Maybe you dislike sherry, maybe you dislike peat, maybe you dislike joy and puppies and rainbows and happiness. It's possible. Either way, you would be in the minority. Most people love this stuff. Now, it is worth noting that for this bottle, this is one I picked up, I think it was in Turkey, and that was like 2 years ago. And I popped it as soon as I got back. So this bottle has been open for almost 2 years now. So a peated whiskey that's been open for almost 2 years, is that going to be a problem? You'll have to stay tuned to find out. In Hollywood, we call that a hook. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into our review. In the meantime, if you'll kindly leave a like down below, that would be greatly appreciated. For our specs, this one comes in at a respectable 46.3% ABV. It's non-chill filtered, however, it is colored. For looks, I love the Ledaig bottles. I think they're cool, they're stylish, they're simple, they're modern. The 18 here, I do actually prefer the stuff like the Rioja or the Bordeaux that I had recently. Those have more like pops of color. This is all gray, but it's still a very good look. We'll give it 4 out of 5. This does say non-chill filtered. It does not say natural color. It says it's a sherry cask finish. We get some tasting notes. Beyond that, it's a pretty bare bones label, but I don't mind that about it. Aside from not mentioning the color, and of course they're not going to mention that they are colored. It's okay for information, and it's a good look. All right, so the first thing I get on the nose is that Ledaig peat, that funky Ledaig peat. Behind that, we get these waves of like sweet, fruity sherry in here. I get stuff like berry syrup. I get maraschino cherries, I get strawberry jam, there's red licorice in here, there's gummy candies, there's salt, there's caramel, there's butter, there's some minerals, there's some oak in here. Beautiful nose. On the palate and finish, this is a great mouthfeel. It's big, but it's also restrained. So we have very big sherry, very big peat in here, but they have good manners. They give us a measured, gradual arrival. There's fruit syrup, there's cherry cola, there's toffee, there's caramel, there's honey in here. I get nibs, which is kind of like this cherry flavored licorice candy. There's also an interesting birchwood flavor here. And no, I don't eat trees, but it's got this kind of like birchy, foresty thing going on. There's also salt, there's peat, there's some pretty intense herbal notes in here. There's some faint wintergreen. We get a medium finish lingering on indistinct spices, some of those herbal notes, and again, cherry cola. All right, so this is great. Obviously, I love this one. But what's interesting is that this is a style of whiskey that I was much more into a few years ago. Like back in the day, I loved stuff that was like sweet and casky and had all these dramatic flavors. And that's a style of whiskey that I find myself gravitating towards less and less nowadays. So obviously, I knew I was still going to like this stuff, but I wasn't sure how much or like where I'd land on it. So do I still like this? Of course I do. But do I still think it's a truly great whiskey? Yes. Still really fantastic stuff. And what I love about this stuff is the intensity, because typically 18 years old, if you have an 18-year-old peated whiskey, it's going to be quite round. It's going to be a lot softer. And while I do think the age gave us some nice sophistication and our flavors are very well sort of integrated, it's still got that edge. This offers us a lot more bite than a lot of 18-year-old peated whiskeys, where our peat is more kind of gentle, it's more settled. So if you look at stuff like Kalila 18, or you look at Talisker 18, or even go a little bit younger, you could look at Lagavulin 16. Those are very gentlemanly whiskeys. This one, it's still got some of those teeth. It's still got that punch. Think of it this way. If you're a James Bond fan, if you take a look at the Lagavulin 16, that would be more of like a Pierce Brosnan style James Bond. It was more like soft and smooth and kind of suave. This would be the latest guy. This would be the Daniel Craig James Bond, just because it is punchier and it's rougher around the edges. Great pop culture reference, Jeff. Actually, while we're on the subject, why don't we get this comment section popping? Who do you think the next James Bond should be? Personally, I think Aaron Taylor Johnson would be fantastic. I think Henry Cavill would be great. But for me, there's really only one perfect choice, and that's Wanda Sykes. Anyway, coming back to this stuff, it has pretty much everything that you would want from an 18-year-old. It's integrated, it's balanced. And when I say balanced, I don't just mean the flavors themselves are balanced, they are, but it also balances that edge and that vibrancy with that sophistication that comes with being an older whiskey. Very few whiskeys can pull that off. I also love the texture here. This is mouth coating, it's buttery. I love the sweetness to this. Now that sweetness might be a little bit much for some people. If you are very sensitive to sweet things, or if you are sensitive to too much sherry, yeah, possibly you won't like this one, but I think it walks that fine line. I don't think it goes too far. And as I said, I've yet to meet someone who doesn't like this. I mean, obviously there's going to be people out there that don't get along with this one, but even if you don't love it, you're not going to be bored. We have these really big, intense flavors. So it's like big peat, big sherry. And of course, we do still have some of that Ledaig funk. The funk in this isn't going to be quite as like cheesy or lactic as it is in some of their other expressions. I would say the funk in here is more like almost herbal in the way it expresses itself, but still very, very characterful. This is brimming with character. So again, you're not going to be bored. As for me, of course, I still love it. I still think it's one of the best 18-year-olds on the market. I think it's one of the best peat sherry combos out there. And if we're comparing it to that old batch 3 in the fancy wooden box, I would say this is every bit as good. Now, I did mention earlier that this is a bottle that's been open for almost 2 years. And if you watched my review of Lefroy Quartercast last week, then you'll know I had a bit of a discussion about peated whiskey that's been open for a very long time and how it can sometimes go downhill. And while that has been an issue for me with many peated whiskeys in the past, not just Lefroy's, but any peated bottle, if you leave it open for too long, it might end up going downhill. This one has not. We're coming up on 2 years now, and it's just as vibrant and just as delicious as it always has been. So that's nice. Anyway, of course, for score, this is getting a nice score. I mentioned that in my last review of this stuff, I gave it 93. That was back in the old days. As a general rule, if we're taking my old scores and converting them to my new scoring system, we'd bring things down about 2 points, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So for score, I'm landing on 91 for this one. This is great if you like your peat sherry combos. It's great if you like your 18-year-olds, if you're a fan of Ledaig. Yeah, it's a banger. Now, before we touch on value, I do want to give a quick thank you to all my patrons and channel members. Guys, thank you so much for the support. And if you guys want to help out, if you want to help keep the channel financially sustainable and independent, there are a number of ways that you can help. I've got both Patreon and PayPal linked down below. Anything and everything helps, guys. And again, a huge thank you to those of you who are already supporting the channel. It means a lot to me. Yeah, now let's talk value. So for value, this one sells for about 100 US, so roughly 80 pounds here in Taiwan. I bought it for a little bit less than that like 2 years ago, but no, if I want to buy it today, roughly 100 US. For that price, I think that is a great deal. You're getting a hell of a whiskey for the money. Now, I assume this is going to be a little bit more expensive or a lot more expensive depending on your market. We're very lucky here in Taiwan and we tend to have very cheap prices. So of course, I'll leave it to you to decide what is reasonable for this one. But if you're on the market for a delicious, high quality 18-year-old, you can do a whole lot worse than this one, guys. It's fantastic. Okay, that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, I've got Patreon and PayPal down below. And of course, I want to hear from you. Have you tried our Ledaig 18 here? What are your thoughts? How does it compare to the rest of the line? How does it compare to other 18-year-olds? You can let me know all of that down below. And finally, down below, you can let me know what you want to see me review down the line. And I'll keep it in mind for my upcoming videos. Bye, guys.